There is a number Statistics Canada publishes every year that most Canadians have never heard of, and the cities at the top of it are not the cities you think. It is called the Crime Severity Index, and it does not just count crimes, it weights them by how serious they are, which means a city can have a modest population and still post a number that looks like a typo. This is not a list about big cities being scary. Toronto and Vancouver, the cities everyone assumes are dangerous, do not crack the top 20. The cities that do are smaller, mostly in the Prairies and the BC interior, and the reasons they are there are specific, structural, and in most cases, not improving. This is a countdown of those 20 places, from concerning to genuinely out of control, and by the end of it, you will understand why the most dangerous postal codes in this country are not the ones you were taught to be afraid of. Number 20 is Cranbrook, British Columbia, a city of about 20,000 people tucked into the Kootenays that looks, in every promotional photo, like the kind of place you retire to. The Crime Severity Index here sits well above the national average, and the driver is property crime, specifically vehicle theft and break-and-enters tied to a regional drug trade that uses the city as a waypoint between the BC interior and the Alberta border. Picture this. It is October, the larches on the mountainside have gone gold, and you are walking back to your truck after dinner downtown. The street is quiet in the particular way small mountain towns are quiet, and for a second, the whole evening feels like the postcard. Then you reach the parking spot and the truck is not there. The report you file is one of roughly 400 vehicle thefts the detachment processes that year in a city this size, and the officer taking your statement does not seem surprised. That is Cranbrook. Beautiful, small, and quietly one of the more burglarized cities per capita in the province. Cranbrook's problem was geography and proximity to a drug corridor. The next entry's problem is smaller, more concentrated, and in some ways harder to solve. Number 19 is Williams Lake, British Columbia, a Cariboo region hub of around 11,000 people, where the Crime Severity Index has been climbing for the better part of a decade. The catch here is concentration. A small number of repeat offenders cycling through a justice system without enough capacity to hold them account for a disproportionate share of the break-and-enters and assaults the detachment logs every year. Local business owners describe a familiar rhythm, the same faces showing up in incident reports months apart. Picture this. You open your shop on Oliver Street at 8 in the morning, coffee in hand, and the front window has been put in again, the third time this year. The insurance deductible is the kind of expense that used to feel like an emergency and now feels like a line item. The RCMP detachment is doing what it can with the resources it has, and what it can do is not enough to change the math. Williams Lake's problem was a justice system without enough capacity to hold its repeat offenders. Number 18 is a town one step further down that same road. Number 18 is Quesnel, British Columbia, another Cariboo town, smaller than Williams Lake, with a crime severity index that the provincial government has flagged in its own internal reporting as disproportionate to the city's size. The local economy leaned heavily on forestry for generations, and as mill closures hit the region across the last several years, the social cost showed up first in property crime and then in violent crime tied to addiction and an unstable local drug supply. Picture this. It is a January morning, the cold, the kind that makes your breath visible the second you step outside, and you are scraping frost off your windshield in your own driveway when you notice the side door of the garage is open and was not when you went to bed. Nothing dramatic happens. Nothing has to. The accumulation of small violations like this one is what actually defines life in a town working through an economic transition it did not choose. Quesnel's economy lost its anchor industry, and crime filled part of the gap. The next city never had that excuse, and its number is climbing anyway. Number 17 is Medicine Hat, Alberta, a city of about 60,000 that most Canadians know for being unusually sunny and not much else, which makes its position on this list a genuine surprise to most of its own residents. The numbers here are driven heavily by methamphetamine-related property crime, a pattern consistent across much of southern Alberta, layered onto a downtown core that has struggled with vacancy since the energy sector slowdown. Picture this. You are walking your dog along the River Valley pathway at dusk, the kind of evening Medicine Hat is famous for, all that wide prairie sky going orange, and you pass a stretch of pathway that used to be a quiet shortcut and is now a place the city posts safety advisories about. The beauty of the place and the caution required to enjoy it exist in the same 5 minutes, and most longtime residents have stopped finding that strange. Medicine Hat's sunny reputation has not protected its downtown. The next city's economy is built on a workforce that never quite puts down roots, and that instability shows up in the numbers. Number 16 is Grande Prairie, Alberta, a regional hub for the province's northern oil and gas industry, with a crime severity index that has remained stubbornly elevated even as energy prices have fluctuated. The pattern here is what criminologists call a boomtown effect in reverse, a transient workforce, a housing market that never quite stabilized, and a downtown core that absorbs the social cost of an economy built on shift work and isolation. Picture this. It is 2 in the morning, and you are closing up the restaurant where you work, the parking lot lit by a single sodium light that has needed replacing for a year. You walk a coworker to her car because that has become the unwritten policy, not because anyone told you to, but because everyone already knows. The drive home takes you past 3 different properties with boarded windows, and you stop noticing them the way you stop noticing anything you pass every day. Grande Prairie's transient workforce is one version of instability. The next city's instability comes from geography, a highway corridor that moves more than just traffic. Number 15 is Red Deer, Alberta, almost exactly between Calgary and Edmonton, a city whose crime severity index has consistently ranked among the highest of any mid-sized city in the country for nearly a decade. The geography is part of the problem, a highway hub position that makes the city a convenient stop for the regional drug trade moving along the Queen Elizabeth II corridor. Picture this. You are at a red light downtown on a Tuesday afternoon, completely unremarkable, and you watch a hand-to-hand exchange happen on the corner in full daylight, fast enough that if you blinked, you would have missed it, and unhurried enough that the people involved clearly did not expect anyone to care. Red Deer's downtown revitalization plans get discussed at every council meeting, and the Crime Severity Index has not moved enough yet to suggest those plans are winning. Red Deer's location on the highway corridor is a problem of geography. The next city's problem is a documented public health crisis that geography cannot fully explain. Number 14 is Lethbridge, Alberta, a university city that on paper should not belong on this list, and on the Crime Severity Index ranking consistently does. The driver is a documented and unusually severe fentanyl crisis, one that produced one of the highest per capita overdose death rates of any city in Canada in recent years, and the property and violent crime that accompanies an open drug market of that scale. Picture this. You are a parent dropping your kid off at a downtown daycare, navigating a route you have adjusted twice in 2 years to avoid a specific block, and you make small talk with another parent in the parking lot about which streets to take and which ones not to, the way you would discuss a road closure, except the closure is permanent and nobody built it on purpose. Lethbridge's fentanyl crisis is one of the most severe and most documented on this list. The next city's catch is less about substances and more about a police force outpaced by growth. Number 13 is Chilliwack, British Columbia, in the Fraser Valley, a city whose population growth over the last decade has outpaced its policing capacity in a way the local detachment has been candid about in public reporting. The Crime Severity Index here is driven by a mix of property crime and an active gang presence connected to the broader Lower Mainland drug trade. Picture this. You come home from a weekend away to find your back gate open, your shed unlocked, and a stranger's footprints in the mud leading from the alley to your yard and back out again. No broken windows, no forced entry, just the unmistakable evidence that someone walked through your property like it was a hallway. The RCMP file number you are given joins thousands of others that year, and the case, statistically, will not be solved. Chilliwack grew faster than its detachment could staff for. The next city has the opposite problem, a population that has stayed roughly the same size while its downtown core changed completely. Number 12 is Penticton, British Columbia, an Okanagan tourist town famous for wine country and beaches, with a crime severity index that has shocked visitors who assume the postcard version of the city is the whole story. The catch is a concentrated and visible homelessness and addiction crisis in the downtown core, one the city has tried to address through several high-profile and controversial housing interventions that have not yet meaningfully moved the numbers. Picture this. It is a July evening. The lake is the exact shade of turquoise the tourism board photographs, and 2 blocks from that lake, a street you would have to walk through to reach your hotel, has become the kind of place locals root around without thinking and visitors discover by accident. Penticton sells one version of itself to the rest of the country and lives a different one. Penticton sells one version of itself and lives a different one. The next city does not even get the postcard version. It gets straightforward geography working against it. Number 11 is Kamloops, British Columbia, a city of about 90,000 at the convergence of 2 major rivers and 2 major highways, a geography that makes it a genuine transportation hub for the regional drug trade in a way the city has not been able to police its way out of. The Crime Severity Index here has remained persistently elevated, with vehicle theft rates among the highest of any mid-sized city in the province. Picture this. You park your car at the mall on a Saturday afternoon, run in for 20 minutes, and come back out to broken glass on the pavement where your car used to be. The mall has signs now, the kind that used to feel like overreaction and now read as simple disclosure. Kamloops residents have developed a specific vocabulary for this, calling it getting hit, as in, I got hit again, the way you would talk about weather. Kamloops residents have a verb for being robbed. The next city's residents are mostly retirees who never expected to need one. Number 10 is Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, a city of about 35,000 whose crime severity index regularly lands among the highest of any city its size in the country. A statistic locals find genuinely baffling given the town's reputation as a quiet retirement destination. The driver is a small but highly active group of repeat property offenders, the kind of concentrated criminal activity that produces high numbers in a low population denominator. Picture this. You are an older resident, exactly the demographic that moved here for the quiet, and you wake up to find your garden shed emptied of every power tool you own, the 3rd time in 2 years. You report it because you always report it, and the constable who takes the call recognizes your address before you finish giving it. Moose Jaw's numbers come from a small group doing a lot of damage. The next city's numbers come from a substance crisis its own health authority has called an emergency more than once. Number 9 is Brandon, Manitoba, the province's 2nd largest city, with a crime severity index that has consistently outpaced Winnipeg's on a per capita basis, a fact that surprises almost everyone who has not lived there. The catch is a documented and severe methamphetamine crisis that local health authorities have called a public health emergency more than once in the last several years. Picture this. You work the overnight shift at a gas station on the edge of downtown, and the protocol you have been trained on for handling an erratic customer is now something you have used often enough that it no longer raises your heart rate the way it did the first time. The job posting did not mention this when you applied. It rarely does. Brandon outpaces Winnipeg per capita, which surprises almost everyone who has not lived there. The next city does not surprise anyone who follows these rankings because it rarely leaves the top 5. Number 8 is Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, a city that has held one of the highest crime severity index scores of any municipality in Canada for several consecutive years, a fact local officials have addressed publicly and repeatedly without the number meaningfully improving. The drivers are intertwined, a documented gang presence, a methamphetamine supply that has not slowed, and a justice system processing a volume of violent and property offenses that exceeds what the local detachment can meaningfully reduce. Picture this. You are a nurse finishing a shift at the regional hospital at 11 at night, walking to a car you have deliberately parked under the brightest light in the lot, a habit every staff member there has independently developed without being told to. The drive home takes 9 minutes, and you have learned exactly which two intersections to avoid lingering at. Prince Albert's number is the product of multiple overlapping crises with no single fix. The next entry is here for a quieter and more uncomfortable reason: proximity to a bigger problem next door. Number 7 is Selkirk, Manitoba, a smaller city just north of Winnipeg, included on this list because its crime severity index per capita has, in several recent reporting years, exceeded that of cities many times its size, a statistic that genuinely surprises people who think of crime severity as a function of population density. The catch is proximity, a small city absorbing displacement effects from criminal activity pushed outward from Winnipeg's urban core as enforcement there intensifies. Picture this. You bought your house here specifically because it was not Winnipeg, a quieter version of the same region at a fraction of the price, and 18 months later, you are installing the same security camera system your sister installed in the city you left, for largely the same reasons. Selkirk absorbed displacement from a city its residents thought they had escaped. The next city does not have that excuse. Its number stands entirely on its own. Number 6 is Prairies, Manitoba, a city of about 13,000 whose crime severity index has, in multiple recent years, ranked among the highest of any municipality in the entire country, regardless of size, a statistic that puts it in direct comparison with cities 10 times its population. The driver is concentration, a small number of chronic offenders cycling rapidly through a justice system that releases faster than it can rehabilitate, producing crime numbers that look, on paper, like they belong to a much larger and more troubled place. Picture this. You own a small business on Saskatchewan Avenue, the town's main street, and you have stopped keeping anything of resale value in the front window after dark, a decision every other shop owner on the block made independently around the same time you did, the kind of consensus that forms not through conversation, but through identical experience. Prairies, a city of 13,000, outranks cities 10 times its size. From here forward, the entries are not small towns punching above their weight. They are major cities that should know better. Number 5 is Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, a city of about 270,000, whose crime severity index has consistently placed it among the most severe of any major city in Canada, a ranking the city's own police service has acknowledged in its annual public reporting. The catch is scale combined with concentration, specific neighborhoods bearing a disproportionate share of violent crime tied to gang activity and an entrenched drug trade, while the rest of the city functions largely as you would expect a prairie city to function. Picture this. You are choosing a neighborhood to rent in, comparing two listings nearly identical in price and square footage, and the deciding factor turns out to be a single street address, because everyone you ask, your coworkers, your realtor, the building superintendent, gives you the same unprompted warning about the same 6-block radius without you bringing it up first. Saskatoon's problem is concentrated in specific neighborhoods everyone already knows to avoid. The next city's problem has reached the provincial legislature's own front steps. Number 4 is Regina, Saskatchewan, the provincial capital, with a crime severity index that has placed it at or near the top of major Canadian cities for several consecutive years, a fact that sits uncomfortably alongside the city's role as the seat of provincial government. The drivers are violent crime and a documented gang presence operating with a level of organization that has drawn specific attention from federal enforcement agencies in recent years. Picture this. You attend a public consultation on downtown safety, packed past capacity, where residents take turns at the microphone describing assaults, break-ins, and a level of daytime visible drug activity that the council members on the dais, to their credit, do not attempt to minimize. Nobody at that meeting is exaggerating, and nobody at that meeting leaves with a solution. Regina's council does not minimize its numbers anymore, which is its own kind of admission. The next city is large enough that its crime statistics make national news on a regular basis. Number 3 is Winnipeg, Manitoba, a city of over 700,000 people whose homicide rate has, in multiple recent years, been among the highest of any major city in the country, a statistic that has made the city a recurring subject of national news coverage in a way few Manitobans find flattering. The catch is breadth. This is not one neighborhood's problem contained to one part of the map. It is a citywide pattern touching property crime, violent crime, and a gang presence that has been the subject of dedicated federal task forces for years without resolution. Picture this. You are scrolling local news on a Sunday morning the way you do every weekend, and a homicide notification appears, and you realize with a kind of tired recognition that you are not shocked, that the emotional register you reach for is closer to acknowledgement than alarm, and that this adjustment in yourself happens so gradually you cannot identify when it started. Winnipeg's problem is breadth, a citywide pattern with no single neighborhood to point to. The next city's problem has been the subject of formal federal inquiry, and the findings are public record. Number 2 is Thunder Bay, Ontario, a city of about 110,000 people that has, in recent years, recorded one of the highest per capita homicide rates of any city in Canada, a statistic that has drawn coverage from national and international outlets and prompted multiple federal and provincial reviews into systemic policing failures in the city. The catch here is the most documented of any entry on this list, a body of inquiry findings, coroner's reports, and independent reviews that have identified specific institutional failures contributing to the crisis, failures the city and the province have acknowledged without yet resolving. Picture this. You are a parent in Thunder Bay deciding which route your teenager takes walking home from school, a decision other Canadian parents make based on traffic, that you make based on a map of the city you have built from years of incident reports and word of mouth, a map your teenager has also memorized without you ever explicitly teaching it to them. Thunder Bay's documented institutional failures are the most studied on this entire list, and the city is only the second most severe on the index that actually measures this. Number 1 is North Battleford, Saskatchewan, a city of about 14,000 people that has, in multiple recent years, recorded the single highest Crime Severity Index of any municipality in Canada, regardless of size, a distinction that means this small prairie city has technically outranked every major metropolitan area in the country on the metric that matters most. The catch is everything: gang activity, a severe and ongoing methamphetamine crisis, a documented shortage of policing resources relative to call volume, and a justice and social support infrastructure that local officials have repeatedly and publicly stated is inadequate for a city this size. Picture this. It is a Tuesday afternoon in a town small enough that everyone genuinely does know everyone, and you run into 3 separate acquaintances at the grocery store, each of whom mentions, in the kind of flat tone reserved for genuinely normalized information, a break-in, an assault, or a friend who left town because of one or the other. Nobody in that conversation calls it a crisis. They call it Tuesday. That gap between what the data says and what the people living inside the data have stopped being able to feel is the real finding of this entire list. So here is the actual taxonomy. Because every city on this list got here for a different reason, and the reasons matter more than the ranking. Some of these places are dealing with a documented drug crisis the entire province has acknowledged and not yet solved. Some are dealing with concentrated repeat offending that a justice system without enough capacity cannot interrupt. Some are absorbing displacement, crime pushed outward from a larger city as enforcement there tightens. And some, like North Battleford and Thunder Bay, are dealing with a combination so severe that government bodies at every level have launched formal reviews without producing a fix. None of these places are dangerous, because the people who live there are dangerous. They are dangerous because specific identifiable systems, policing capacity, addiction treatment access, housing, and a justice system processing more volume than it can absorb, have not kept pace with what is actually happening on the ground. The Crime Severity Index will be published again next year, and most of these cities will still be on it, because the conditions that put them there have not changed. The only question worth asking after a list like this one is not which of these cities to avoid, it is which of these systems Canadians are actually willing to fix.